Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And welcome into the first game recap damn podcast of the 2022 season. I'm your host, Carter Bahns. I'm joined, as always, by BeaverBlitz.com publisher Angie Machado, who watched Oregon State's season opener last night from the comfort of her house. I was at Reser Stadium in the temporary press box to watch the action. And we are here on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network and BeaverBlitz.com to recap it all. Oregon State's 34-17 win over the Broncos from the Gem State, from Treasure Valley. It was, I think, a game that had a little bit of everything, and a game that Angie and I are both pretty excited about the result. I know a lot of Oregon State fans out there are pretty happy with the way things went. We can't waste too much time here in this intro. We got to get right into it because we've got so much to cover.
So much.
But I want to, give you a little rundown of what we're going to cover here since this is our first game recap pod of the year. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I saw at Reser Stadium. Angie's going to give a little bit of perspective from the TV broadcast because I wasn't able to see it. I'm curious what her thoughts were. And I know a lot of Beaver fans watched the game from home and are probably curious what she thought about that as well. We're going to take a look at the game at a glance, give you some stats, talk about the game flow, where the scoring plays happen, where those turnovers came in. And then we'll go good and bad from the Oregon State perspective. And then we're going to revisit some of our keys to the game that we provided on Thursday when we had Jordan Kay on and previewed the game. But Angie, before we dive right in, how are you feeling on this Sunday after a season opening win from Oregon State?
Doesn't 1-0 feel good? Carter, we talked right before we jumped on air, and you haven't covered a season opening win. So we were talking about, you have all that excitement. You built up the start of the season, sky's the limit, you're 0-0, and you have all this excitement. There's so much buzz on BeaverBlitz and the fan base. And then the past 5 or 7 years, they come out and lay an egg. And that momentum, that huge amount of excitement is just gone in the poof of a 60-minute game. Last night was so much fun. Yes, there's things they need to clean up, but how fun is it to wake up? Okay, and I'm gonna be that person. Okay, can we just keep this super real? Because it's even better when the team down south not only loses but just kind of gets demolished. I mean, I thought they'd lose. I just didn't think they'd be embarrassed on national TV.
I wasn't going to bring it up yet because I thought if we had time at the end, we could go down the list.
Yeah, we don't need to.
Where of how the rest of the Pac-12 fared, and I think at some point we should touch on just the way the conference represented itself, and I think how Oregon State fits in as potentially the team that came away with the best win of the weekend. We're going to talk all things Oregon State, Boise State over the next hour or so. I have a feeling this podcast could go over an hour. We normally try to keep it to an hour. I just think the two of us have so many thoughts from opening week. I don't know what to expect from this pod. Again, we haven't done a game recap pod since last December. So we're probably going to ad lib here and there. But after Oregon State's first season opening win since 2015 against Weber State, like I said, the two of us have all sorts of thoughts. At BeaverBlitz.com, we'll run our weekly column behind the paywall, He Said, She Said, where we're going to give all of our thoughts in written form. Angie sent me her the she said element of that. I haven't read it yet, so I haven't heard what Angie's takeaways are. I have a feeling they're very similar to mine. So let's jump in and let's talk Oregon State, Boise State. I was at Reser Stadium along with about 27,000 fans. A decent amount of them were wearing blue, but most of them were there for the home team. It was a beautiful day for a home opener in the Willamette Valley. It's about 70 to 75 at kickoff, right in there. Blue skies, sunset over the Coast Range. It was it was a great setting for a college football game, even with the construction closing the west side of Reser Stadium, the temporary press boxes that we were sitting in, and only having fans on one side of the stadium. A really interesting atmosphere. But Angie, I'm curious, before we dive into your thoughts on just the broadcast and watching it from home, did they pan over the stadium at all? How much did they talk about the atmosphere, and what was it like watching that from the TV perspective?
They did, and I probably said to Eric and the boys a couple of times just how beautiful it looked on TV, because pregame, right before the kickoff, they kind of panned out and you could see the sunset over Mary's Peak, and the sky was just on TV. It was an amazing color of blue with that orange, with beautiful. But they spoke to Scott Bahns briefly after the half and showed that side of the stadium and talked about a little bit what it was going to be. But the bulk of it was showing. So from a viewing perspective, it looked like a sold out stadium because you didn't see, the cameras weren't showing that Boise State sideline. So it looked good. I thought the students for school not being in session for another couple of weeks, I thought they showed up pretty strong. And no, I thought it looked pretty good for TV. And like I said, they did explain a couple times about just the construction going on and the whole new side of the stadium.
The thing that I wanted to see the most, and what I honestly was more excited about this than the game when I first walked in, was the new video board, which is just absolutely gargantuan. I mean, that thing is huge. When you think about the video portion of the old video board, that had the static advertisements on the side and kind of the LED lit up scoreboard, whatever. It wasn't video board. It was just it was manual. When you think about how much of that was video board and you compare it to what they've got now, I think this one is 3, if not 4 times as large, which, during the game, it's not incredibly noticeable because they do have the sides for stats and score and time and everything. But when they go to replay and when they throw graphics up there for third downs, first downs, touchdowns, whatnot, it is unbelievable how crisp, how big, how intimidating that thing feels. It is an element of Reser that I think really changes the game. I think that west side, when it's done, is going to be unbelievable. But having that big of a video board is a game changer for fans.
And it closes off. It seems to close off that end a little bit, kind of bowl it in. And gosh, see, Carter, this is before your time, but I still remember the mid-'90s and the dot races on the little square stadium. Yeah. So there you go. It's a far cry from that.
Yeah, fan experience, I think, was pretty solid. I did hear some horror stories from the concessions line.
Okay.
I actually experienced that myself because media members were given, for the first time ever, this is the first time Oregon State's done this, we were actually given vouchers that we could go use at the concession stand. That's for awesome. Food. I will say, at the other places that I've been that do that, we get about $20 to spend. Oregon State is giving us $10, which actually isn't enough for a full meal. So I know that some media members did have to pay out of pocket for their burritos and whatnot. But yeah, I went at halftime to go redeem it, and I said, yeah, I could be here for an hour if I waited in this line. So I bailed, went during a timeout later. So that was really the only negative I heard as far as fan experience, which you're going to expect when the concession stands are cut in half.
Yeah.
But you're still dealing with a similar amount of fans in the stadium. It was a sold out crowd. It was very loud. Interesting from my perspective, for the sound to be coming from one side. I kind of described it as a wall of noise, whereas before, you've got this bowl atmosphere where it's coming at you from all sides.
But I could, from the TV, really I could hear the DJ. And so the DJ was very solid. Playing some good music. I could hear that on the TV broadcast. So,
and that's something that Oregon State introduced a couple of years back to, kind of heighten that fan experience. And I know a lot of people were pretty happy with how that turned out for week 1 this year. Boise State fans showed up. Their band actually traveled. I don't love it when 2 bands are in the same stadium because oftentimes they're playing over each other. And when you've got music going, it's hard to coordinate that. But it added to the atmosphere. I think Boise State fans showed up pretty well, and they weren't overpowering by any means, but there was a cheer after every play, regardless of which team was making the big play. So overall, I feel like this is going to be a pretty good year at Reeser. I know it's not ideal because of all of the construction, and it's certainly, I think it impacts us more than it impacts a lot of fans. Even though I know a lot of fans have been displaced and, you know, are moving around and everything. But I felt like the media hospitality was great. Our temporary press box
Yeah, how was
setup
the press box?
viewing angles are not great. I'm not going to lie. I sat at about the 7-yard line closest to the video board, about 15 rows up. So anything on the opposite half of the field, I found myself defaulting to the video board to see what was going on. But everything that happened in front of us was, you know, at a great view. The box itself has heaters built in, so it won't be too bad come October and November. Wi-Fi was solid except for at the very end. We've got power. We've got everything we need. And as far as temporary setups go, I thought it exceeded my expectations. So
good.
I was very happy with how things went at Reeser Stadium. Angie, on outside of what you mentioned earlier from the TV broadcast, anything stand out to you? Because this was an ESPN game. You know, this was on the flagship at 7:30 in a prime spot for West Coast viewers. But I feel like ESPN maybe had sent and put in the effort of kind of their JV marketing and crew.
Yeah, and I think that was the case. And when I was putting together on Tuesday, I was putting together the How to Watch feature, and I saw that they were sending Beth Mowens as the play-by-play. And you know, hey, I am all for females in this business. I think it's amazing, but I've listened to some of Beth's games before, and I have not been a huge fan. You know what? I actually have to give her a shout out because it was way better than I thought. She did a great job. And maybe that was just because Oregon State was playing well and it was a kind of exciting game, but I thought she did a really good job. I thought the crew did a good job. So while I know Beaver fans were a little taken aback that maybe we got the second tier crew, I thought they did a solid job, and I was not disappointed with that. Camera angles, okay. I don't know. They didn't seem to have a ton of cameras. You know, we didn't have the over the field camera and all kind of the fancy stuff, but
I will real quick mention, I believe they had somewhere in the realm of 9 to 10 cameras there because and you probably missed this in that you weren't there, and some insight for viewers at home who didn't go to Reeser. On the video board, they have so much space now that they actually have all of the different angles available at the same time. Now, you know, they'll go full screen and it kind of mirrors what the replay crew is looking at that time. But there are times during the replay where they have all of the different camera views at the same time, which I thought was kind of a cool feature.
And we saw that
use that new scoreboard.
Yeah, and on TV. So there was a play probably down in front of you, Carter, where Alex Austin was called for a late hit.
Yeah.
And they were, once you saw those on the, you know, you could see that he was kind of being pushed into the player. And then also on Trey Lowe, when he stepped out of bounds, we saw plenty of camera angles on that. So no, I thought the broadcast was great. I thought the stadium looked good on TV, and no complaints from me.
We love to hear that because we know in the past ESPN has kind of mailed it in as far as those Pac-12 late night games go. The production quality has not been the best, so it's good to hear that they had an adequate number of cameras, that the broadcast crew exceeded expectations. The overall quality was solid, and I think we'll see more of that from ESPN this year. I know John Canzano reported that they were going to emphasize that, and they had stated that they fixed those problems.
Their team knowledge maybe wasn't as great. I mean, they could have talked to you, Carter, beforehand, because it was kind of funny. I laughed a couple of times right at the very beginning when they started talking about Chance Nolan being, you know, a deep ball passer, and I was like, I mean, he's gotten better, obviously, and we'll talk about that. But it was just kind of funny. Some of their hot takes. You
know where that came from? That probably came from their meeting with the coaching staff and key players beforehand. Oregon State was probably trying to push that narrative, and we're going to talk about that just in a minute here. That narrative actually was accurate on Saturday. I think Chance Nolan really stood out with his deep ball. So we've spent a quarter of the podcast already just talking about kind of the atmosphere, and that's just a first game of the season thing. We're not going to spend 15 minutes talking about, you know, what Reeser Stadium was like. But I think it's about time we really jump into this game here. So I took a bunch of notes, and Angie's going to add some analysis and thoughts as well along the way. But just kind of a quick glance at this game, how it played out. Oregon State
I want
won.
to say
Oh, go
quickly.
ahead.
I'm just saying, if you guys notice that I keep bugging, I have a contact that's bugging me right now, so I'm not having a seizure. I'm just trying to focus on stuff. Anyway, go for it, Carter.
All right.
I
Well,
didn't want everybody, all our view, if everybody on YouTube watching this saying, "What is Machado doing?"
and everyone on the audio side right now
Yeah,
is,
they're like,
is like,
"What?"
what is she talking about? But no, Oregon State won 34-17, doubled up Boise State in a handful of categories actually, but the one that matters the most, of course, is the score, and the Beavers get that 17-point win. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we went on the record with our staff picks, did you have 34-17?
I think I had 31-14.
Okay,
I
so
think, but close.
close enough.
Yes.
I was a touchdown off in both directions, so
Yeah.
you'll see that reflected in our standings on Friday.
I don't
we
know,
release next
Carter.
week's, but
My 10-1. It could still hold true. You just wait and see.
we'll see. In the yardage category, Oregon State racked up 470 yards of total offense, while it held Boise State to just 311. So a pretty big discrepancy there. Oregon State with about 160 more yards than the Broncos.
Well, and 74 of those came in that one giant run. So
yeah,
that's it kind of pads their stats a little bit.
Which also makes this next category a little deceiving. Oregon State outrushed Boise State 178-126. And when you take away that big 72, 74-yard rush by Taylon Green, Boise State had 50 yards on the ground outside of that. So, I'm not going to call it a fluke play because it happened and big plays do happen. But if you take that out, Oregon State was very, very solid in run defense. Through the air, Oregon State just missed the 300-yard threshold. It picked up 292 yards through the air to Boise State's 185. So again, Oregon State just offensively and defensively, I think thoroughly outplaying Boise State, and that's reflected there in those numbers. The turnover category, now this was the big one. So the first half alone just featured an absurd amount of turnovers. But overall, there were 8 combined turnovers in this game, which it's week 1. It's going to happen. There's going to be some sloppy play. But Oregon State forces 5 turnovers. 3 of those were interceptions. 2 were fumbles. And then Boise State took the ball away 3 times, 2 of those on interceptions and 1 of those being a fumble. So both defenses really getting after it and forcing takeaways. As far as getting into the backfield, Oregon State, I thought, Angie, this was one of our one of the things we were going to be watching for. Could Oregon State take a leap forward in this category? 8 tackles for loss for the Beavers. 2 of those were sacks. I think those are 2 pretty good numbers for week 1. But then protection-wise, Oregon State's offensive line did a pretty good job limiting Boise State to 5 tackles for loss and no sacks. So Chance Nolan had all kind of time to work with. Out of all of those numbers that I just threw out there, Angie, I know that's a lot of numbers. I'm a big stats guy. Anything really catch your eye that you want to kind of touch on before we move on here?
Well, I think turnovers. I think you have to look at that because when you look at overall in a season, that the turnover margin is really kind of the biggest indicator of how successful a team is going to be. So Oregon State's +2, and then you kind of kick yourself at how. I mean, that Chance Nolan pass that he tried to throw out of bounds. I mean, a couple, what it was, but we haven't seen Oregon State be that aggressive in a long time. And then again, tackles for loss, I think is huge. I mentioned that in our pregame on Thursday when we were talking about it, just how I wanted to see some pass rush and pressure the quarterback. And I think it was even more important when they made that flip to Green. And I think just having a new quarterback in there pressuring him was even more important. Yes,
and a redshirt freshman too, who
a redshirt freshman
hadn't played very much throughout his young career.
And you could tell. I mean, that he's going to be good. He's not. If he was a better passer, he probably would have been a high 4-star and probably recruited by everybody in the country. So super talented. I didn't realize he was from Louisville, Texas. So he was a former teammate of Damian Martinez. Can you imagine that backfield?
Jeez.
Dang.
That is a lot of rushing ability.
That is a lot. I mean, I was watching Pac-12, their post game, And Nigel Burton laughed at that 74-yard run that Taylon Green had. He laughed. And he goes, "Wow, I think he just ran 74 yards in 5 strides." The kid was moving. So
He's quick.
a breakdown for Oregon State, but yeah, I think those two stats stand out the most to me.
I completely agree. So this next section here, and again, we're going to follow it kind of a similar format here as we do these game recaps throughout the season. So the next thing that we're going to jump in here to is just kind of the game flow. So we're going to hit on some of the key plays. We're going to go chronologically here, and we're going to start with the first drive of the game, which I thought set the tone and was a very good sign for this Oregon State defense, because Boise State received the opening kickoff. Oregon State won the toss and deferred. The Broncos take the field and Oregon State forces a 3-and-out right away. And I just said, that's exactly what you want to see from a defense that you're expecting to take a step forward. Get them some early confidence, make Boise State give up the ball after starting with it. And it eventually was a sign of things to come, but I thought that was a great sign, as I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you consider third downs were Oregon State's Achilles heel for the past 4 or 5 years. So to see that, and I see one of our comments here, and it kind of made me chuckle because that was me, that after seeing the defense in that first quarter, I was never stressed or worried the rest of the night. I mean, that set the tone. I think that first 3-and-out, it set the tone for the rest of the game. And we knew the defense. I think I texted you, Carter, during that first quarter and said, I'm glad the defense is playing this well, and what we said all fall camp was coming to fruition.
Yeah, in fact, somebody tweeted at us and said, "Hey, you guys were right. You were telling us that Trent Bray's defense was revitalized and had a lot of energy, and they were flying around." And turns out we know a thing or two from watching practice. But defensively, Oregon State got off to that strong start, forced a couple of turnovers, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. But I thought it was the offense that really came to play in the final 5 minutes or so of the first quarter. You mentioned earlier on the deep ball, and we talked about how that was something that in the past hadn't really been part of Chance Nolan's game, but on Saturday it absolutely was, and Oregon State really opened things up. A lot of that was because Boise State was stacking the box and trying to take away the run, which to a pretty solid extent it did. But that opens up a lot of plays downfield. And so it starts off with Chance Nolan finding Trayshawn Harrison for a deep ball that would have been about a 50-yard touchdown that unfortunately
it was there too.
Hands.
It was there. And Carter, again, I think I texted you. I mean, we text throughout the whole game. That was our other big takeaway from fall camp, was the inconsistency in our question marks at wide receiver. And we saw that rear its head again too. So, but that was just, a dagger, because that one, a dime. I mean, Nolan started off that first half just throwing dimes. Beautiful. So that was tough to see, but I think teams, now that seeing some of those passes that he did complete, are going to have to maybe back off stacking the box, because Oregon State is going to be more dimensional than just running the ball.
That was something that we saw throughout camp too, was Nolan would put the ball on we lost Angie.
I'm here.
We'll get her back in just a second. But one thing that we saw throughout camp was that Nolan would put the ball on the money, and then his receiver, whoever it was at the time, would drop it from time to time. And so we were hoping that wouldn't necessarily carry over into the season. And unfortunately, Angie's back. Unfortunately, we did see that come to fruition on Oregon State's first real scoring opportunity. But as Angie alluded to, Nolan did connect on a couple of those passes. Just a few minutes later, he hits Luke Musgrave for 27 yards. A great catch by Musgrave, mind you.
Yes.
And then on the ensuing drive, a 47-yard touchdown pass to Tyjon Lindsey, who got behind the defense, made a good play to get into the end zone there as well. So 2 big chunk plays that both resulted in touchdowns, passes that were quite a ways downfield. I think even the one to Lindsey was at least 25, if not more, through the air. So both of those were categorized as long passes. Nolan's only incompletion on passes 20 yards downfield or more was that drop earlier on, which again would have been a 50-yard touchdown or so. But no, those 2 big touchdown plays, again, I just think that unlocked part of the offense that we haven't seen from the Beavers in quite some time.
Yeah, because I think last year they were a little more one-dimensional with the run game with BJ, and you rode that just because that was such easy gain. But um, we know Oregon State needs to be more multi-dimensional than that. And um, as those receivers get better, that's how the Beaver season's going to go, because there's still talent in that wide receiver room, and we'll talk about that. But again, okay, the end of last season, I was really hot on Anthony Gould, and then second half he had another big touchdown. So I thought he played well as well.
Anthony Gould was, he was out there he had a couple of plays. I want to say he racked up. I've got the stats here. I can pull it up, but I think he had about 50 yards through the air.
Yeah.
So good to see him get involved, because of course we were both kind of clamoring last year for him to get used more. We're talking about how Oregon State was kind of one-dimensional.
Yeah.
In that the running game wasn't really a factor. Gould obviously will. I think he will get involved in that run game, and actually was a little bit. I think he took a carry, but only one touchdown on the ground outside of Jack Coletto, which we're going to get to in a minute.
Yeah.
But from the running back room, 3 guys took carries. It was Deshaun Fenwick, Trey Lowe, and Damian Martinez. Martinez had 10 carries for the team lead to Fenwick's 9. He had 1 more yard on the ground. He had 40 yards to Fenwick's 39. But Fenwick did find the end zone. So he had the lone touchdown from a true running back. It was a 12-yard carry that kind of went off to the right side, off tackle, and he found a little gap through the defense and got into the corner of the end zone. That was Oregon State's 3rd touchdown of the first half. Everett Hayes converted a 20-yard field goal to give Oregon State 24 points in the first half. And then the defense.
The defense was the story of the game, but that first half, we can talk about the 24 points but think about was there 2 turnovers in the first half?
No, there's more than that. Oregon State forced 4 turnovers in the first half.
Oregon State forced 4, yeah. So, but every time, it was Oregon State I know we had Oregon State turn the ball over, and then the Oregon State defense would get it right back, or down at the goal line, we had Boise State ready to punch it in and a turnover there. So the defense was the story of that first half, I think, completely. They shut them down to the point that they benched a 3-year starter at quarterback. When do you see that happen? Game 1, where they just flat out just benched him partway through the first half because he was so inefficient.
Those 4 turnovers, so 2 of them were fumbles, 2 of them were interceptions. 1 fumble was Jaden Grant knocked the ball loose, and Alex Austin, and Austin was credited for the recovery, but I believe Chatfield was there as well. Drew Chatfield. Yeah. So I think the 2 of them hoisted the chainsaw.
I was going to say, there's a picture of Chatfield with it too. So,
and I was like, where did that come from? But I think that was that play. The other forced fumble was a strip sack by Riley Sharp, which I thought was just. Not only was it the play that benched Hank Bachmeier, but I think it was one of those plays where we said, okay, that's a good sign that this defense is going to get the pocket pressure it needs to make plays on the quarterback, because in the past, Oregon State struggled with pass rush, wasn't getting the quarterback, wasn't recording sacks. And when you not only record a sack, but strip the ball at the same time, that's one of the most impactful plays a defense can possibly make. And you saw that in week 1 with Riley Sharp. And I think Oregon State's, edge rushers were solid all game long. The 2 interceptions in the first half, you're going to have to correct me if I'm wrong here, because I can't remember which was first and which was second half, but I believe one was from Rajon Wright and the other was from Jaden Grant. But yes. I know Alex Austin had a pick as well, so I can't remember.
So Rajon and Jaden Grant was first half. Okay. And then Alex Austin had one in the second half.
With all of those turnovers and just the strong play, a couple of 3-and-outs, Oregon State shut Boise State out in the first half, took a 24-0 lead into the locker room as Jonah Dalmas missed a field goal at the buzzer for the Broncos. So 24-0 at the half. I think Oregon State fans are like over the moon. I'm sitting there in the press box thinking, we did not even remotely see this coming. I thought Oregon State was going to score 27 in the whole game. I had Boise State scoring 24 in the whole game, and it's 24-0 at half. Not at all how I expected it to go, but I think at that point we were like, okay, this is the Oregon State team that we thought we could see, but we didn't expect to see.
Yeah. I agree. And then I sat there that first half, and I think it was just kind of, Eric and I were talking about it and how impressive it was. I think I said this earlier, that this team, the defense, still continue to play so strong, even with a quarterback they had no film on and had not prepared for. Totally a different quarterback than a Hank Bachmeier. So really impressive. Yep, there were some warts and there were some sloppy plays that third quarter. You can't fault that though, because I really think Oregon State was just trying to establish a run game at that point and run the clock, and they struggled some. But that pass by Dunmore, damn. So I see, but somebody here says that maybe, Dunsmore put himself in the convo to be QB2. I don't think he did that, but that was a fun play. I texted you that one too. I was like, was that John Dunmore?
I've got the trick play in our rundown here in a few minutes when we talk about the good and the bad. But let's talk about it now. I mean, John Dunmore on a kind of a reverse to a double pass.
Yeah.
A receiver catches the ball and then he throws it across the field. A pretty good throw to put it right on the money to Trey Lowe, who was streaking down the sideline. 41 yards, could have been a touchdown. They ruled that he stepped out at the 2, and unfortunately, a couple of penalties later, Oregon State settling for 3 points.
Yeah.
But going back to the second half here, as we go chronologically, Chance Nolan opened the second half with an interception. He was trying to throw the ball out of bounds, didn't put enough on it, and it fell into the hands of, I believe, J.L. Skinner, that star safety for Boise State. It's a play that Chance Nolan afterwards in the postgame press conference said, it's just a brutal mistake that I can't have there. He said, it's going to be a point of emphasis moving forward. He said, that's not going to happen again. If I'm going to commit to throwing the ball away, I'm going to chuck that thing into the stands. So I think if we're talking about fluky plays, I think that was just a fluky turnover that you're not going to see again. I have my concerns about Nolan and, his fumbles and whatnot, but that interception was not something that I'm particularly concerned about moving forward. Boise State capitalized on it, got its first points of the game on that drive with a 41-yard field goal. And from that point forward, I think you kind of saw the momentum shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Oregon State's offense sputtered a bit, and that's when Talon Green started to take over for Boise State. He came into the game in the second quarter, but he didn't really put his mark on the game until the third, when he broke free for a 74-yard rushing touchdown. It just showed off elite speed. Nobody was going to catch him. Jaden Grant had a shot if he could beat him to a spot, but Green streaking down that sideline, it was too tough to defend that. And then on the next drive, he carries one in from 4 yards, and just like that, Boise State's back within 2 scores at, I believe at that point, was it 20? It was 27-17.
27-17. Yeah, I think it was a 10-point game.
Yeah. So at that point, I think Oregon State fans are feeling a little jittery, but Oregon State had done so much in the first half that it still had a cushion to where Boise State's playing out of its mind for, about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's still 2 possessions shy of even tying the game.
Yeah.
And then in the fourth quarter, Oregon State, to its credit, kind of recovered that momentum. You saw Jack Colotto come into the game on the offensive side, as he did quite a few times, lined up at the fullback spot and broke free for a 41-yard touchdown with about 10 and a half minutes left. That put the game out of reach. Yeah. At that point, it's a 17-point game. Nobody scored the rest of the way during that final 10-minute stretch, and Oregon State, I think it's fair to say Oregon State cruised to a win from that point forward. There was really no question.
I mean, did you ever feel that the game was in doubt? Did you start to want? Yeah, no, it never had that feeling of Oregon State being in trouble.
Even when Boise State started scoring and scored, I think all 17 of those points were unanswered. Mm-hmm. I wasn't even really concerned that they were going to take it far enough to tie or take the lead. I just felt like Oregon State had done so much and that it would take such a dramatic collapse for Oregon State to give that lead up. I just didn't see that happening.
Yeah.
So,
and the way the defense was playing, I didn't see it happening.
So that's kind of how that one played out, just from a big play, momentum changing perspective. That's the game flow for you. We're going to come back here in just a minute and talk about what we thought went well for Oregon State, what we thought they need to improve upon this week before they get ready for Fresno State. And then we're going to revisit some of our keys to the game and see how Oregon State did there. But Angie, I want to give you a chance here. And I will admit, I didn't consult with you before the podcast. Is the 75% off deal still in action at BeaverBlitz.com?
It is.
All right.
So
I want you to promote that, because now is
huge.
seriously the time to jump on board with Oregon State playing this well, with so much anticipation going into week 2. Now's the time to take advantage of that deal.
Yes. So this deal will not come again until after the season. So you want to, or the end of the season, probably Cyber Monday is the typical time that we'll run this promotion again or something similar. 75% off an annual subscription to BeaverBlitz. We're taping this Sunday night at 5. This is September 4th. This promotion runs until midnight tomorrow, Monday, Labor Day weekend or Labor Day. 75% off works out to $26.85 for the year. 75% off the annual price, less than 7 cents a day. It's so worth it. You are not going to want to miss anything. The season has the markings that it could be a lot of fun, a very special season, and you don't want to miss it. So this is the time to save some money. Jump on board. You got Carter, you have me, Raju, Peter, and the entire staff of 24/7 writers and recruiting analysts. There is no better place to be for Oregon State knowledge and scoop than BeaverBlitz.com.
5 turnovers from the Oregon State defense highlights the good. I don't think there was anything that stood out more than the takeaways and just the sheer dominance that we saw from Oregon State's revitalized, re-energized defense. A lot of that came from the secondary that Angie, you and I have been hyping up for, I don't know, 9 months at this point, because of all of the experience and talent that it brings back. I think we really saw that come to fruition in a game where Boise State oftentimes was just chucking the ball downfield and hoping to make something happen. Oregon State said, you can't do that against us. We just have too many good playmakers back there that you have to scheme up a pretty good passing game, and you have to have some real talent at quarterback and receiver to move the ball against us through the air.
Yeah, I think that definitely was the biggest takeaway, but I think the second, maybe 1B for me, was the play of the front seven.
Yeah.
And to see that pocket collapse, Boise State doesn't have a bad offensive line, and Oregon State manhandled them. That pocket collapse time and time again. We saw pressure. We saw the 8 tackles for loss. I have been hypercritical of Oregon State's defensive front, and I think they really, really showed improvement last night.
And I think we saw that kind of come to fruition in the run game as well, where I mentioned, Taylon Green ran for 102 yards and was far and away the leading rusher in this game. But you take away his runs, let's just hypothesize here. If Hank Bachmeier stays in the game, I mean, Boise State probably wouldn't crack 100 yards rushing for the game. And obviously, that's all hypothetical. These plays did happen, and so we have to talk about them. Oregon State giving up a 74-yard touchdown to a quarterback with his legs is a problem. I don't care how fast the quarterback is. I don't care if you had great coverage downfield and it was a broken play and he was trying to make something out of it. It's a play that happened, and it's one that Trent Bray is going to look at and say, okay, how can we prevent that from happening again? Because everything went perfectly until Taylon Green scrambled out of the pocket there. The next leading rusher for Boise State had 16 yards.
Yeah. I mean, they completely shut down the run game. Completely. Like you said, if Hank Bachmeier was in at quarterback, I mean, so without that 74-yard run, I think it was 52 yards they had total rushing, it might have been 25.
Yeah.
I mean, Oregon State's run defense, stellar. Pass defense, like I said, 5 takeaways, 4 of those, or 2 of those, or 3 of those, were interceptions. Yeah, Rajon Wright, I thought, played out of his mind too. I know Alex Austin was named defensive player of the game from Coach Smith. He released that just right before we jumped on. But I think Rajon actually played pretty well too.
One more note from the run defense that we cannot let this go under the radar. George Holani, who is Boise State's running back, projected all Mountain West guy, somebody who everybody affiliated with that program is super high on. Somebody who was hurt last year but came back and was very productive when he was healthy at the end of the year. He carried the ball for 13 yards on
13.
what I
Yeah.
believe was, yes. Oh, sorry. He carried the ball 13 times
Okay.
for 9 yards. So
Okay.
not even a yard per carry for George Holani, which was,
It's
I mean, I expected him to have a pretty solid game. You know, I figured Oregon State's run defense was going to look better, but never in a million years would I have guessed that George Holani would carry the ball 13 times for 9 total yards.
I mean, he's a beast too. I mean, he's a great running back.
And so I think, you know, as we said, that's a testament to Oregon State's front seven, which in the passing game got a decent amount of pressure as well. 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hurries, and then those 8 total tackles for loss. Obviously, that's, you know, you do 8 minus the 2 sacks and you got 6 tackles for loss. So 6 times Boise State carried the ball and was stopped behind the line of scrimmage. So just, I mean, I can't say enough about Oregon State's defense and what it did against Boise State. And one thing that I asked Trent Bray about before the game on Wednesday, I said, you know, I know you don't set thresholds for, oh, we want X amount of takeaways or we only want to give up X amount of yards, but what are some areas that you look for as far as determining we had a successful game?
Yeah.
And he said third downs and red zone. Well, what did Oregon State do on third downs and in the red zone? Boise State was 4 of 13 on third down.
You're down.
Which was, I mean, I can't do the math that quick off the top of my head, but I know that that's less than 33% of the time Boise State's converting. Oregon State allowed third down conversions on 50% of those situations last year. So that's immediate improvement there.
Yeah.
And Boise State went just 1 of 4 in the red zone. So 3 times they didn't even come away with points when they got inside the 20-yard line, which is, I mean, that efficiency from Oregon State's defense is unbelievable. 1 for 4 in the red zone. You don't see that.
No. And 100% turnaround from a year or 2 ago.
Oh, yeah.
And
just
just
night and day.
I mean, completely night and day. It's amazing what a coaching change can do. And the players just seem so happy. And so, I mean, Coletto in postgame talked about just how it has just made things easier and they play. I mean, there was some swagger back on that defense. And we haven't seen that in Corvallis in a long time.
Coletto himself said it was night and day from last year.
Yeah.
Speaking of the good, so we talked about everything that we liked from the defense. Let's talk about the offense. So we've already talked a bunch about Chance Nolan and how he unlocked the deep ball. But I think outside of those 2 interceptions, and one of them I think was fluky again, and the other one, honestly, could have been caught by Tyjon Lindsey. Kind of bobbled it. I think it was an unlucky interception, one that more often than not is probably going to either be caught or fall to the ground. So I think 2 turnovers that you look at and you say, okay, those are, you know, you're probably not going to see a ton of those. I think all in all, it was one of Nolan's better games. And certainly that first quarter where he started 8 of 9, he started the game 9 of 10, but in the first quarter, he went 8 of 9. 149 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's the best quarter from Chance Nolan, hands down. I don't even think there's one that you can look to that's comparable.
No, I think when I look at Chance Nolan's best games, I think USC from last year has to be right up there. But I think the first half, especially, I thought he was efficient. I thought he made good decisions. I thought the third quarter, he kind of tried to maybe run a little bit more. But again, the Bees were trying to establish a run. I think some of those were design plays. Some of them, I think he just tried. But
he was efficient on the ground.
He
carried the ball 4 times for 28 yards. That's an average of 7 per carry, which outside of Coletto was the best of any Oregon State rusher.
So no, I do. I think it ranks right up there. Maybe his second best game ever as a Beaver.
Luke Musgrave also had a pretty good game from the offensive side. I think really carried over his momentum from the final 2 games of last year against Oregon. He showed us what we have expected to see from Musgrave over the last couple of years. Followed that up with a few catches in the LA Bowl. And then this week leads Oregon State with 6 receptions. Next highest total on the team was 3. Catches balls for 89 yards. And he had that touchdown, which was the first of Oregon State's season. It took Luke Musgrave 3 seasons to record an offensive touchdown that came against Oregon last year. Took him all of about 10 minutes this year to record one.
No, I mean, he has definitely worked on his hands. That was his biggest knock, I think. The first couple seasons was he'd get targeted, but he wouldn't be able to hang on to the ball. So to see that growth in his game is huge. I look to him to be a big leader this year. He did have in that third quarter a couple like back-to-back bad. He got a penalty.
Yeah.
2 penalties, I guess.
He had 2 penalties in a row
back to
after
back.
Oregon State got the ball down to the
2-yard line. It was when the Trey Lowe, they called it back out of bounds at the 2. And then Oregon State walked away with that whole thing with no points. That
3
was
points.
Or 3 points. Yes,
I believe
yeah,
they had
you're right. You're right. They
field
kicked
goal
field
there.
goal. But no, it was that aside, I thought he had a solid game, and what we're seeing from the receivers, Beavers are going to need for him to really kind of be that. And we've talked about it year in and year out that we see him and maybe, like a big bodied Stanford tight end receiver type. And with Oregon State's smaller, quick receivers, they're going to need a guy like him to really step up and be that kind of go-to big bodied receiver that can, break through the press coverage and get open and make those tough catches.
That's exactly what he looked like too. I mean, a lot of those catches came over the middle of the field where he's matched up against linebackers and safeties who are going to be bigger than corners more often than not. And if those guys can't stop him, really, nobody's
going to stop him. I mean, that's just it. He's faster than a lot of them.
Yeah,
he's bigger than a safety. So I mean, it just creates such mismatches. And if he's able to catch the ball, especially if you can hit him in stride when he has full momentum, it'd be nearly unstoppable.
This is what we've been looking for from Luke Musgrave since he came here as a true freshman. I think just kind of puts a bow on all of the good stuff we saw from Oregon State. Of course, here we are 3/4 of the way into the show, and we haven't really talked about the concerns. This is week 1. There's a lot to clean up. There always is. You've got turnovers. You got the penalties, which we just talked about with Musgrave having a couple.
Yeah.
There was a lot in this game that was concerning.
Yes.
I think the fact that Oregon State still won by 17, had a 24-0 lead, and is going to come away from this game saying we have all sorts of stuff to clean up, says a lot about Oregon State's progress, how much it has improved, and the fact that the Beavers are winning comfortably when they have 10 penalties for 100 yards.
And against a quality opponent.
3 times against, like you said, a team that is picked to win its division in the Mountain West. It just says so much about where this program is.
If this game had happened against Idaho or Portland State, I might be feeling a little different because Oregon State's expected to roll big. This is against a very quality opponent it was a 50-50 toss-up really by odds makers in Vegas. So this is yes, there's stuff to clean up, but I'd much rather come out of this game with a nice big win. I mean, that game was never in doubt. But very obvious things that they can work on and clean up, because I think it was Coach Erickson had always said the biggest improvement for any team comes between week 1 and week 2. So this is going to be, because those are tangible things. They've just spent 4 weeks practicing against each other. And no matter, your coaches can tell you time and time again, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. Until you actually go up against an opponent and really see where those deficiencies lie. This now just gives the coaching staff all the power again to be like, okay, this is how we're going to help you, and this is what we need to do. Recraft a couple things. Now Fresno, I mean, if we were playing Montana State, it might be a different ball of wax, but now they have to go on the road to play at Fresno, which not going to be an easy task. But I'm anxious to see where this team is on Saturday night in Fresno, and if they can clean up some of the penalties, if they can clean up some of the ball catching, Trayshawn and some of the drops that they had, and try to contain a little bit better. But I really can't complain too much about the defense. I thought the defense, except for that one big run, but it's funny, if you watch the post game with Washington State, it was, they barely squeaked by Idaho, and the media is all nitpicking about things. And it reminded me a little bit of Allen Iverson's, we're talking about practice, because the coach Dickert's like, you guys, it's week 1 and we won. We're talking about a win here. So at that time, like I said, I think it might be a little premature to get too nitpicky on all the bad, but I think it's definitely, if they're still doing the same things week 3, 4, then we might talk. But like I said, I think you take this, you go back to work and have tangible things to work on, and let's see what happens next week.
Oregon State's been such a disciplined team since Jonathan Smith took over that I don't think you're going to see 10 penalties in very many games this year.
It was really lopsided, though. So at one point in the ESPN broadcast, they said that Boise State had 0 penalties. So I tweeted that out, and then Carrie Eggers corrected me and said Boise had 1. But so 1 versus 10. I mean, again, Boise State's not perfect. It was interesting.
Oregon State was also offensively 4 of 13 on third down, which we just mentioned. If Oregon State's defense did such a good job holding Boise State to 4 of 13 on third down, you have to look at that same number for the Beavers offense and say, okay, well, they need to become more efficient on third down. Maybe that's getting ahead of the chains and setting yourself up with 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s. Maybe that's shoring up the passing game on 3rd and long. There's multiple ways you can approach improvement there.
I think it's the lack of the run game. I think that's the biggest thing.
I think that is what cost them, because more often than not, they were finding themselves in 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, which is obviously always going to be more difficult to convert upon. Another thing that we want to see is Oregon State take a step forward in containing mobile quarterbacks. Yes. And I think the caveat there is obviously Taylon Green had that big play. He scored twice. He was Boise State's leading rusher. He was the leading rusher in the game by a factor of 2 in the rushing category. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember, Oregon State game plan for Hank Bachmeier, who's not a dual threat guy. He's mobile enough that he's going to avoid sacks all the time, but he's not Taylon Green. He's not probably the fastest quarterback Oregon State's going to see this year. Yeah. And so I think the fact that, Green only had 1 big play, and it's not like he did enough to pull Boise State all the way back. I think the fact that it was a quarterback Oregon State hadn't prepared for, all in all, I don't know if you can blame Oregon State for
honestly,
all of that.
They come out at after half. I mean, it was 24-0. They wanted to try to establish a run. It kind of went a little sideways there for a quarter, but they were able to regroup and come back. And, that last touchdown by Jack Coletto was the nail in the coffin. So
Eric F. makes a good point. Bray did a good job making adjustments to contain Green in the 4th quarter. Yeah, that long run came in the 3rd, and obviously his second touchdown was only a 4-yarder, which, I mean, I could probably run a 4-yard touchdown if I had good enough blocking. So, I think Green was limited to the 1 big play, and really outside of that, he looked like a solid game manager. He led a couple of good drives, and obviously all of Boise State's points came with him under center. But Oregon State, all in all, did a good enough job to respond to the quarterback change that, Boise State was never really able to make it. It was never in question.
No. And even when they got within 10, I mean, there were times, a couple years ago that I think all Beaver Nation would have been chewing fingernails and thinking, oh no, here we go. And it just didn't have that feel. It had that feel of, okay, they'll figure it out. And the defense held tough, and offense was able to score. But how exciting, again, that we're 1-0. Beavers are 1-0 right now, heading into week 2.
And a lot of that comes from the fact that Oregon State delivered on our keys to the game, which we outlined on Thursday. So my offensive key, and Angie agreed with me, although she kind of went an opposite direction. My offensive key to the game was to move the ball through the air, because I figured Boise State was going to try to limit the run. And, Boise State has such a good secondary that in order to maintain balance, the Beavers were going to be able to move the ball through the air. And they did that. Oregon State passed for 292 yards, got the 2 touchdowns through the air. I don't think you could really ask for more from Oregon State against a secondary as good as Boise State's.
And see, my key to the game was to ground and pound with that secondary, and we didn't see as much of that. But they didn't need to, because
they didn't need to. If they were going to take away the run to the extent that they did, the passing game was going to be there. And so I think that's why our keys kind of went hand in hand, because we said it for the same reason. I said, Oregon State's got to move the ball through the air because it needs to maintain balance. You said, well, they got to be able to take advantage of the fact that Boise State's got this good secondary and run the ball, so that they have to respect that. Yeah. Oregon State, by and large, did a pretty good job maintaining balance. I know it wants to get more production from the run game, but it's still, in fact, I should have the number up here. Yeah, it still managed 178 yards against a defense that, even when it did find success through the air, it was still loading the box.
Yeah. I mean, that's just it. And we got to remember that Oregon State lost B.J. Baylor, who was Pac-12 leading rusher last year. So it's not going to be maybe overnight that Damian Martinez and Deshaun Fenwick and Trey Lowe can replicate that. But yeah, Boise State was loading the box that whole first half.
And even
daring them to run and into the third quarter. Yeah. I mean,
defensively, we were looking for Oregon State to establish a presence in the backfield. That was our key. That was something that, I think if Oregon State's defense was going to show improvement right out of the gate, we said it's going to show up here. It's going to show up in the pass rush. It's going to show up in the running game. And sure enough, Oregon State gets into the backfield 8 times, 8 tackles for loss. 2 of those were sacks, 2 more quarterback hurries, the strip sack from Riley Sharp. You can't ask for much more against a Boise State team that returned a lot of talent on its offensive line, that had a mobile quarterback for 3/4 of the game. And before that, had a quarterback that had all sorts of experience under his belt. The fact that Oregon State was able to do what it did defensively up front, man, I just think that is exactly what you want to see and what you expect from a Trent Bray-led defense.
And that is, it still should give Beaver Nation that hope of the sky's the limit for this year. If the defensive front can play with that much aggression against a good opponent, not somebody that is expected, wow. And then just consider that week in, week out improvement that the coaches talk about that they want to see, just get a little bit better every single week. This defense could really be special.
We have just a couple of minutes left, and we've covered everything we need to cover from Oregon State's win over Boise State. So I do want to highlight a couple of other scores from around the Pac-12 because it was a really interesting week from the conference. It struggled against the SEC. It had 2 games against the SEC. Oregon obviously got absolutely demolished by Georgia, losing 49-3. Utah goes down to the swamp at Florida, came up just 3 points short of beating Florida.
Game,
had an opportunity at the very end. Cam Rising was intercepted in the end zone. If not, at the very least, that game's going to overtime because Utah's probably kicking a field goal there. So the conference didn't perform against other Power 5 conferences like you would hope to see it, but I think for the most part, it took care of business where it needed to. Arizona State with a big win over Northern Arizona by 37. Colorado, I think, that 38-13 loss against TCU. You and I don't expect really anything from Colorado this year, so that wasn't a surprise.
Colorado is the basement of the Pac-12.
Yeah. UCLA 45-17 over Bowling Green. Arizona 38-20 over San Diego State. I think surprised some people. I said Arizona State's going to be a surprise this year. I don't think it's the worst team in the Pac-12. It played hard for Jed Fish last year. I didn't see an 18-point win coming, but I think Arizona,
especially against San Diego State. So how about that? The Pac-12, who struggled against Mountain West opponents last year, goes out and takes care of business over Boise State and San Diego State week 1.
USC put up 66 points on Rice in a 66-14 win. Cal took care of business against UC Davis, 34-13. Stanford against Colgate. Game was never in question, 41-10.
Colgate had a football team.
That's a toothpaste. That is a toothpaste brand. Washington State had a bit of a nail biter against its Palouse rival in Idaho, just about 15 miles apart are those campuses. It was 24-17 with the Cougars pulling that one out at the end. And then Washington in the nightcap, along with Oregon State, getting a win, 45-20 over Kent State. Like I said, all in all, Pac-12 pretty much took care of business where it was expected to, and I think struggled in the games that it was also expected to. So no real surprises there. Angie, one last thing before we get out of here. Was Oregon State's 34-17 win over Boise State the best win for the Pac-12 this week?
I would say it is right up there. And I would actually put Arizona over San Diego State too. I think those two against quality opponents, I think, and neither team being super strong in the past, I think both were strong. I think Boise State had aspirations, though, of going undefeated this season. There was a lot of hope there in Boise that this was going to be back to their glory years, and the fashion that Oregon State, they didn't just beat them. This game was never in question from the first quarter on. So Oregon State, I think, made the biggest statement of any team in the Pac-12.
34-17, Oregon State takes down Boise State in week 1. That's a wrap for our first recap episode of the damn podcast this season. We're going to be back on Thursday to preview week 2, Oregon State at Fresno State down in the Central Valley. Until then, you can follow her on Twitter at Angie Machado 1. You can follow me at Carter Bahns. And we'll talk to you on Thursday for another episode of the damn podcast.